Well, with the parts laying before you, I'll show you how I created or built a tripod hoist with my intent is to lift headstones and gravestones, but could also be used for lifting any heavy object. I looked at some pre-manufactured and it was going to cost me upwards of a couple of $1,000s, $1,500, $2,000 at a minimum. So I'll show you what I cobbled together, and I'll erect it later on and show you stages. But basically, the main components are, depending on how high a lift you need, these floor jacks, and basically these are basement floor jacks. So if you get a sagging floor above you, you would use one of these to support it. And basically it comes with two tubes, an outer tube and an inner tube that telescope and slide inside each other. So you can see that the box indicates that they're adjustable. Also comes with two pins, this support plate, and kind of an adjuster. So the only thing that we're going to be using out of these kits, naturally the tubes, this plate, and probably one of those bolts or a few of those bolts. These tubes come, let's take the inner tube. The smaller diameter tube only comes with two pre-drilled holes of 3/4 inch diameter. So I've added more holes to add additional adjustability, and then I had to add holes down on that end to make everything interconnectable. Same thing with the outer tube. This outer tube comes with several holes pre-drilled for adjustability, but then I had to add more holes at the opposite end, and you'll see in most of these tubes I've added at least 4 holes on each end, so I've got at least 4 positions to install pins for adjustability and to connect them together. So these run currently, I think these were about 39 bucks before sale, about 35 bucks a piece after sale. So I've actually got 6 of these. With just 3 of these, I only produce about 5 feet of lift. Other parts that we've got, I've got a used chain hoist that I had on hand. That's a 2-ton. I've seen those roughly, 50, 75, 100 bucks depending on where you buy it. I used one of these supporting plates and just simply bent it. That'll, you'll see later, create a foot at the base of each leg to keep it from sinking in the ground. I've got some smaller little hitch pins, some spring clips, some lengths of chain, and basically those are designed to keep the legs from splaying out when it's erected into a tripod position. I went with these 6 smaller hinge pins. These are 5/8 diameter shaft, grade 5. So rather than using bolts and nuts to connect these pipes together, or these legs, these provide an easier handle. They're beveled to enter and guide into the hole easier. And also with this welded on handle, I can also use that as a point, number one, for holding, moving, and also as a attachment point for this retention chain. Over here we have, again, three sets of those floor jacks. So the only other components here, so far we've bought 3 of those smaller pins, 3 of those safety clips. I've got 9 of those hitch pins, and I bought a 20-foot length of chain and actually cut those down and into 6-foot lengths. So when I set the tripod up and splay the legs, they're 6 feet apart. and then naturally I can reposition those chains further up or down the legs. The other parts, we've got a 12-inch by 5/8 diameter, and this is grade 8 bolt. And then I've got a section of chain. Initially bought 2 feet, not sure how much I would need. This is, I think, called grade 70, and basically it was it looks pretty heavy duty, which it is, but I needed to go that big so the bolt would slide through the hole. I did end up cutting off 2 chain links off of the 2-foot section that I had bought, which hung down a little low. While I'm here, so other than drilling some holes in these tubes to make them telescope and can connect together, we also had to drill holes for the top of the tripod. On the center piece, you only had to drill 1 straight through hole. Actually, you do that through all 3 of them. So 1 inch in from the end, 1 inch on center. I drilled, I believe that's either a 5/8 or 11/16 hole, enough to accept the bolt. On the 2 outer ones, on the outside, I had to basically create an oblong hole so that this leg would splay out when I erect it. So at 1 inch on center, I drilled a hole. At 2 inches on center, I drilled another hole, and then I used a cutoff wheel to remove the additional metal to create this hole. So now when we erect it, you'll see that now the leg can tripod out or sway out. I took one of those bolts. There's two in each kit. I've inserted one of them in the uppermost position in each tube right now, just as kind of a dead stop. So, or if I needed it more compact and wanted to telescope or bring a tube for compactability and transportation, I can remove those. But right now, we'll just leave them in there. So we'll put this on pause, and I'll go ahead and erect a section of basically these 3 sections and show you the initial results before we add extensions. Okay, the first step of assembly, I'll install the smaller diameter tubes or legs inside the inner or the larger diameter tubes, and then we'll stand it upright. Okay, before I stand it upright, I thought I'd kind of show you everything assembled. So you have to kind of keep in mind with the chain. So this leg is going to be there we go. This center leg is going to be thrown outward. So essentially that chain needs to be hanging down in the middle. So I flipped it this way. I've got my pins inserted. You'll see one of them. I've got these tubes extended. I'm going to call it to the extreme length. I've left enough tube inside each other where it would accommodate at least 2 pins. With these grade 5 pins, you probably, and depending on the weight you're lifting, you could probably get by with 1 pins. Even though 2 came with the box, if you were truly using it in a basement floor system or a floor jack, you'd use the 2. And so I also repositioned this one from experience, pointing it out. So when that leg sticks out, that handle is on the outside of the leg, which will make more sense when you see it upright. On the bottom, I've attached the feet as well as the chain. So if you're working especially if you're working by yourself or on slippery terrain, the retention chains will keep things from splaying. And you may find that you might have to change the position, or for example, these two are pointing this direction, that one is pointing, let's say, vertically here, vertical, horizontal. If you once you get it up, depending on the feet, you may decide that needs to be rotated. Just pull your pin, readjust, but that shouldn't be a problem. You may even want to slide this center tube in a little bit, depending how heavy your hoist is, how tall you are. You might find that having it kind of tilt towards you a little bit might ease in connecting your hoist. But let's get her in the air and we'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so far, if I step back far enough, try to find some decent lighting. We've got it erected. I've got the retention chains in place. You may find you want to adjust these. Maybe you like them better or feel more secure if they go around the outside of the base. I'll even show you another means if you decide not to use those, but you could actually just use the spring clip and hook it into one of the holes. Just depends on if you find these suitable or come up with another idea on your own. So, and also I mentioned the handles, having them these hitch pin style handles, and these are welded on. They'll easily act as a lifting, moving handle. If you've got extra ones, you might even want to put one down toward the bottom. But just things to, number one, make it strong and safe, but also aid in your movement, especially, or moving and assembling, especially if you're working alone. So there's our chain to attach the hoist. Come along, block and tackle, whatever you're using. So let's go ahead and rig mine up. Okay, we've got the hoist connected, and in this configuration with just 3 of these basement floor jacks, and we've got about a 6-inch splay or distance between each of the 3 tripod legs. That gives me about a vertical lift, basically up to about this point. I got about 5 feet to the ground. The thing about the change you may or may not like, just depending on what you're moving. Let's say you've got an object out here that you're trying to lift, move into here. Keep in mind that these chains might impede on if you're trying to slide something over. You might need to cover that with a board or something, possibly remove it. Or I'll show you another idea that may also aid in keeping these chains away from, for example, a delicate headstone or object that you want to try to prevent from marring and scratching. So let me give you an idea on how we can customize or move these chains around, and then later on we'll add some extensions and raise this higher. We might have to move it out from under this tree, but I was trying to stay in the shade. So let's pause and we'll readjust our safety chains. Okay, now you see that we've relocated the safety chain from at the very foot of the tripod, and now we've brought it up midpoint. And here's another, basically a benefit of these handles. These are welded handles, so I can clip right to these. One thing I might do if I find that this is my preferred location of the splay chains is I may add another hook for each direction. Right now I've also got them kind of on the inside of the tripod. You may want to bring it around the outside of the tripod for a little more working area. Another advantage, and again, depending on where your holes are in your tubes or your legs, you may decide, you can reposition these chains at a different height, length, or excuse me, different length, different height off the ground. Just depends how far your legs are splayed. Right now we're basically at a maximum amount of extension on the legs just due to the limitations or that 2-inch oblong hole. And I really don't want it much farther than that, because then that just becomes weaker, and then unless I had a tighter or a stronger safety chain, I'd be probably pushing the limits, especially if the feet did not have a good grip into the ground or whatever surface you're on. The other thing I like about the safety chains in this position is it kind of keeps your chains off of the object that you are lifting. So kind of a protection feature, I guess, if you will, of, in this case, my use is going to be for gravestones, headstones, and so it just kind of keeps these as best possible from banging against the delicate or valuable headstones. Some could be 100, 150 years old. So let's show you, now let's go ahead. Again, we're probably just, I think the legs are splayed a little farther apart now, but so we've realistically only got about, a 4 foot worth of lift once we get straps and stuff on, maybe not even that. So let's get this higher in the air by adding some of our extensions on. Okay, working by myself, that took a little grunt work, but now I've moved the safety chain from, originally we had it down on the feet. I've got the feet off now because these tubes or feet are on concrete just for ease of assembly. And also I still have, if I decide to add the last extension on. But basically now I've moved the safety chain to the middle position. It was up on those top 3 pins. Now I've moved it down here, re-extended it. Now I've got that 6 foot length. Really, we're back to the original plus, about 3 to 4 foot tube extensions. Now I have about 8 feet of lift here. And that's probably going to be pretty darn adequate for most at-ground monuments or lifting, for several feet. If I get higher, need more elevation, so to speak, or clearance, then I'll have to add on the remaining 3 legs. But there you have it, folks. That's my tripod chain hoist. And again, you can attach whatever lifting device you want. But that next set of legs, I would strongly recommend having that becomes about a 2-person operation. So hope this helps, gives you some ideas. And if you're using it out in cemeteries, you're doing a great job helping maintain history, family history, the legacies, and just helping some of these, especially these small, poorly funded cemeteries, to keep these stones from disappearing forever. So whatever you decide to use it for, hope this helped. It was relatively easy assembly. And again, let's kind of review some of the parts. So now we've got 6 of these floor jacks. So at retail, 6 times 40 bucks, you're about $240. The hitch pins, the red handled welded hitch pins, I think they were about, all these hitch pins I think are about $3 a piece. You get that grade 8 bolt up there, that's, a few bucks. That chain, 2 feet of that chain was about 10 bucks, and this safety chain. So you're at about $300, give or take, with everything brand new except that chain hoist. So much cheaper than what I was finding online. Just by nature, I tend to try to find a solution with locally available parts in inventory. So if you're handy, you can do this too. Get a friend to help you. Biggest thing is it just takes a little time, you know, drilling the extra holes for the assembly. Otherwise, yeah, I strongly recommend those hitch pins as a means of assembly and to aid in the movement of the legs, to move it, to walk it, to reposition it, and also an attachment point. I think one thing I will do is probably get 3 more of these spring clips, especially when they're on these handles. So one goes on each handle and around the outside. Gives me a little more clearance within the tripod triangle, a little more work area, and it's up to you if you want to go with a stronger chain. So the poorer your footing, or the if your footing is not secure, you get a little hesitation, it could slip out on you. You know, maybe create some kind of a spike. I've seen some online, but otherwise get a very sturdy, or maybe a sturdier chain than what I'm using here. Maybe even something more, you know, similar to a lighter, you know, grade of this welded chain. So enjoy and good luck.